Why is it that nearly every country on Earth is in debt? Have you ever wondered who all these nations owe money to, and why they never seem to pay it off? From the world's richest economies like the US and Japan to developing nations across Africa and Asia, national debt has become a universal condition. But where did it all begin, and more importantly, who is really collecting on these global IOUs? In this video, we'll take you deep into the world of national debt, unravel the complex systems behind it, and expose truths that may surprise you. What is national debt really? National debt isn't just some mysterious number reported on the news. At its core, it's the money a government borrows to pay for things when its revenue from taxes isn't enough. Governments issue debt through bonds or loans to domestic and foreign investors, other countries, and even institutions like the World Bank. For example, when the US government wants to spend more than it collects in taxes, it sells treasury bonds. Buyers of these bonds essentially lend money to the government in return for interest over time. Just like individuals borrow to buy homes or fund businesses, countries borrow to fund infrastructure, social programs, military, and more. Why do governments borrow money? Why don't governments just spend within their means? The truth is, national economies are far more complicated. Borrowing lets governments stimulate the economy in tough times, like during recessions or wars. Take the COVID-19 pandemic. Countries borrowed trillions to keep businesses afloat and citizens supported. Without borrowing, economic crashes would be far worse. Sometimes, debt is used for long-term investments like roads, education, and healthcare, things that pay off over decades. It's also politically easier to borrow money than to raise taxes, making debt a go-to tool for leaders under pressure. Who lends money to countries? When a country needs to borrow money, it doesn't just knock on one door. It turns to a range of lenders. These include international financial institutions like the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank, which offer loans to help countries stabilize their economies, especially during crises. Then there are private lenders, such as global investment banks, hedge funds, and bondholders, who buy government-issued bonds in exchange for interest payments. These private lenders often look for a good return on investment, and how much they're willing to lend, and at what interest rate, depends on the country's creditworthiness. Other countries are also major lenders. For example, the US holds foreign government bonds, and China lends money to nations through initiatives like the Belt and Road Project. These country-to-country loans are often tied to trade agreements, political alliances, or infrastructure deals. Some of the lending may come with conditions, like requiring economic reforms or construction contracts that favor the lending nation. In short, countries borrow from a mix of sources, institutions, markets, and other nations, all with different motives and expectations. Internal debt versus external debt. Not all debt is created equal. Internal debt is owed to lenders within the same country. External debt is owed to foreign entities. Internal debt is usually easier to manage. You can repay it in your own currency and adjust policies more flexibly. External debt, however, can be risky. If a country borrows in dollars or euros and its currency weakens, repayment becomes harder. That's why countries like Argentina and Sri Lanka have defaulted in recent years. A balanced mix of internal and external debt is crucial to stability. Why don't countries just pay off their debt? Because it doesn't work like a credit card. Most countries never actually pay off their debt, they just roll it over. That means they borrow new money to pay off old debt. As long as interest rates stay low and the economy grows, this is manageable. In fact, some economists believe debt is necessary to support modern economies. However, if debt grows faster than the economy or if interest rates rise, the cost of debt service, paying interest, can overwhelm national budgets. It's a balancing act, and when it's mismanaged, the consequences can be severe. What happens when debt gets too high? When a country's debt becomes too large compared to its economy, measured as debt to GDP ratio, it can trigger several issues. Investors may lose confidence, leading to a drop in currency value. The country's credit rating can be downgraded, making future borrowing more expensive. In worst cases, it leads to a debt crisis, like what happened in Greece in the 2010s. Governments are forced to cut spending, raise taxes, or beg for bailout loans, often leading to public unrest and long-term economic damage. So, who do countries really owe? Contrary to what many people think, a large portion of a country's debt isn't owed to foreign powers. It's actually owed to its own people. For example, in countries like the US and Japan, a significant percentage of government debt is held by domestic investors, pension funds, central banks, and even regular citizens through government bonds. This means when a country pays back its debt, much of that money stays within its own economy. It's similar to borrowing from your own retirement savings. You owe it, but it doesn't leave the household. That said, the remaining debt can be owed to foreign governments, global institutions, and international investors. These creditors expect repayments with interest, and if a country struggles to repay, it can hurt its credit rating, increase borrowing costs, or lead to economic consequences like austerity. So, when we ask, who do countries really owe? The answer is layered. It's not just foreign banks or superpowers. It's a complex web that includes local citizens, businesses, other nations, and global financial systems. And each creditor has different expectations, which can shape how a country manages its policies and future. Is debt always a bad thing? Not necessarily. Debt becomes dangerous when it's misused or excessive. But responsible debt can be a powerful economic tool. It can fuel growth, improve infrastructure, and reduce poverty if used wisely. Japan, for instance, has one of the highest debt-to-GDP ratios in the world, yet it hasn't faced a crisis because most of its debt is internal and the economy is stable. What matters more is how the borrowed money is spent and how effectively the economy grows in response. The role of the IMF and World Bank. For many developing countries, the International Monetary Fund and World Bank are major lenders. While they provide essential financial support, they also impose strict conditions known as austerity measures. These often include cutting social spending, raising taxes, and opening markets to foreign corporations. Critics argue these policies hurt the poorest citizens and lead to long-term dependency. Supporters say they help stabilize economies and encourage reforms. The debate continues, especially in Africa, Latin America, and parts of Asia where debt crises are frequent. Why is global debt still rising? Today, global debt has crossed over $300 trillion. That's more than 3 times the size of the entire global economy. The reasons include war spending, aging populations, rising healthcare costs, and massive borrowing during global crises. Developing nations also face challenges from currency devaluation and rising interest rates. Despite efforts to curb debt, the pressure to spend, especially on defense and welfare, keeps it rising. It's a global treadmill with no easy exit. Can a country be completely debt-free? Theoretically, but in practice, it rarely happens. Countries that run consistent budget surpluses, like Norway, can reduce debt significantly. However, being debt-free may not be ideal. It limits flexibility in emergencies. Most experts agree that the goal shouldn't be zero debt, but manageable and sustainable debt levels. Debt, if wisely used, can be an asset, not just a liability. So, what's the solution? There's no one-size-fits-all fix. For rich nations, better tax policies and spending control can help. For developing countries, debt restructuring, fairer trade, and ethical lending are key. Transparency in borrowing, public involvement in financial decisions, and focusing on economic growth are critical. Above all, countries must remember that borrowed money isn't free. It's a promise made to future generations. Managing that promise wisely is the ultimate challenge. National debt might sound like a dry, complicated topic, but it's deeply connected to every aspect of our lives: taxes, jobs, prices, and even global peace. Every country is in debt, but the reasons and consequences vary widely. Now you know why, who they owe, and what it really means. If you found this eye-opening, share it with someone who still wonders why countries can't just print more money. Tell us in the comments. Should countries try to live debt-free, or is responsible borrowing the smart path? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more deep dives like this one.